That's great. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Christy Fairholm-Mader. I'm with Scale Collaborative, and we're the lead organization on these presentations and in developing the resources that I'm going to talk about today. I just want to say that I'm coming to you today from the unceded territory of the Musqueam Nation. So I'm over on Vancouver. I'm normally in Victoria, but I'm over in Vancouver at this point, and so it's a beautiful day. They keep telling it's going to rain, but I so far have managed to be in sunshine. I just want to give Alec a chance to quickly introduce herself.
Hi there. Welcome everyone. I'm Alec Wheeler. I'm the newbie on the Scale Collaborative block, and will be helping Christy with the Business Legacies Initiative. And I am coming to you today from the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. So I'm located in Duncan, Cowichan area.
All right, let's begin. So I know we are all Zoom experts at this point. So I just wanted to say we will be using the chat box. You know, we say non-verbal feedback, like if you're able, we'll do like thumbs up, and you can do the little party icon if you want. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions as we go. And we will have a place where we do some breakout rooms. And as everyone asks, yes, we're recording the session, so we'll send it out to the people that registered, as well as the people who registered and were not able to make it. So one of the things we wanted to just say is that, you know, it's just a 1 hour session, so we're going to go pretty fast. We will send the most important thing is we will also send the PowerPoint to you. So you'll get afterwards a bunch of resources to follow up and to go through them as you wish. I'm Christy Fairholm-Mader with Scale Collaborative. Here is my contact information if you want to reach out afterwards and chat. And I just wanted to say, like, I've been in the social enterprise sector for a long time. I've worked in nonprofits and charities, and I've operated a number of social enterprises. And the very first social enterprise that I was supporting and operating was a cafe in Vancouver's downtown east side that was employing people with significant and serious mental illness. And we look at that social enterprise where, you know, the business exists to either achieve a environmental social mission, or the profits go back into an organization to support programming. But that cafe, the very first one, was an acquisition. We acquired and purchased the cafe and then operated as a social enterprise. So that's where I started my social enterprise journey. And so it's interesting to be back here at this point, beginning to look at how we can look at acquisition as an option for organizations and communities that are interested in social enterprise. So we're going to do a quick poll, and that Fernanda's going to give you right now. Okay, great. So almost everybody here is nonprofit. Half of you representing, considering social enterprise. One of you is operating social enterprise, which is great. We'd love to hear about that. And we have 2 of you that already have experience in acquiring real estate and business. So thank you. So we're going to do a quick round of intros so we know what's in the room. And what I'd like you to do, sorry, my mouse is giving me a hard time here. Is to just unmute, say your name, your organization, and then in the chat, you can either say it or you can put it right into the chat. What's one question that you're bringing to today's session? So I'll just call on names. Medina, how about you? You want to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Medina. I'm in Calgary, and I am representing the Federation of Calgary Communities. So we're kind of a nonprofit that supports other nonprofits. And we've also taken kind of a big step into social enterprise and having an audit program that generates a lot of the revenue, and then is able to kind of offset that with our engagement work. And what is one question that you're bringing into today's session? I don't have a question yet, but I'm sure I'll have lots throughout, and I'll put it in the chat there below.
Great, thank you. Laurel.
Hi, my name is Laurel. I started a tourism and leisure and recreation research company about 8 years ago, and thinking about just different ways to apply my ideas, and have looked at social enterprise. I also am a volunteer president of a foundation in Campbell River where I live. So just kind of looking at different ways to combine my business interests and my volunteering interests and looking for options. So no specific question either, but I'll probably think of one.
That's okay. Thanks, Laurel. Hi, Colin. How about you?
There we go. Hi, Colin Minions. I am in Port Alberni on Vancouver Island, and I am with the Salvation Army, as well as the Bread of Life, which is our local soup kitchen. We do have a social enterprise, I guess, with our Salvation Army thrift stores. But I'm on the food side of things, but I am working on potentially working with a nonprofit in Tofino to open a thrift store out there. So
great.
Getting some information.
Awesome. Thank you. Sean.
Going here. I've been going. There we go. Coming live from Bridge of the Enterprise. I'm Sean. I'm representing the Better Business Bureau, Vancouver Island. So I'm down here in Victoria. The Better Business Bureau is we're doing some research on identifying social conscious organizations in our service area right now. So we're just trying to get as much information as possible about this, these opportunities that are going to become more prevalent in the future. So
great. Thanks.
Information is power.
Thank you. Mark?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Fenwick, and I'm on the board of directors with the Community Futures Central Vancouver Island in Nanaimo. I have a background in property management. I've been with the board for about 3 years now. And I was invited to attend this session just to find out more about the opportunities, because we are looking at that as an organization. So I think my question would be, what are the types or ranges of social enterprises that are out there and successful right now?
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned, I'm with Scale Collaborative. Scale Collaborative is in Victoria, and we're working to help support nonprofits, charities, and build a strong social economy on Vancouver Island and beyond. And we do that through providing training programs, to doing stuff like social enterprise boot camps, working with Thriving Nonprofits program, which is running across Vancouver Island right now. And as I'm going to talk about a little bit more, also supporting nonprofits and charities to look at acquisition. We also are launching an impact investment fund on Vancouver Island to support nonprofits, charities, and other social enterprises to grow and be in a community of peers and get support to succeed. And we're also work with local governments and purchasers to help them mobilize their purchasing back into local communities and for greater impact, which often means purchasing from social enterprises. So we do all things kind of social enterprise and I'm going to say like working with impact organizations. So today we're going to talk about just a quick social enterprise overview. I'm going to talk about business acquisition as a social enterprise opportunity. I'm going to share a story from the Coombs Country Candy. I'm going to talk about the acquisition process. We'll have a chance to talk about what are the specific considerations for nonprofits and charities when they're looking at acquiring, and then is it right for your organization? So, and then we'll provide some different resources. So you might be familiar with this view, and this is the blended value types of businesses, right? So on the very left, we have organizations that are pure charity models that exist on, donations and funding. And that we would say is like a pure nonprofit or charity model. And then as they kind of go towards becoming more enterprising, they might integrate some more fee for service, add some, programs that they charge a bit for, or, connect in that way. And then social enterprises further up. And social enterprise is when there is a market selling goods or services, to people that pay you for those, right? And then the profits go back into to either increase your impact, to do better in your social enterprise, or to support your programming. And then on the other side of the for-profit divide is what we call a social venture. So usually the social enterprise means that it's owned or operated by a nonprofit. A social venture is usually a for-profit entity. But it's, of course, always more complicated than that. And so it's always good to give some examples. So here are some social enterprises on Vancouver Island from the region. And they're really a mix from everything, right? So we have Sarah's Edible Landscaping, so a landscaping business that operates in Cowichan. the Yoga Den, which is a social enterprise, a yoga studio that's was actually acquired and owned and operated by Fernwood NRG, which is a nonprofit in Victoria. The Inn at Laurel Point, which is a big hotel, is owned and operated by a community trust. So a different kind of model of social enterprise. In Nanaimo, we've got the bookstore that helps support literacy on Vancouver Island. It's a beautiful bookstore. We have Confidential Paper Shredding up in Campbell River, where they get contracts to paper shred and then employ people who may face barriers to employment. We have cleaning business, the Clean Start. We have the Mindful Mouthful, which is a catering and food company in the Cowichan. And then over on Powell River, we included the Nook, which is a social enterprise that's operated out of the public library. So there is all different shapes and sizes, and they're as varied as what you want, right? There's SIMS, nonprofits, or any small business. Social enterprises can be anything that makes sense in terms of delivers an impact as well as achieves a business goal. And so what are other social enterprises that people know about that I might have missed? Any others that come to mind? I think you mentioned thrift stores, right? We've got thrift stores all around the island that exist. I haven't heard of the Window. East Van Roasters. And they exist in, social enterprises are in big cities and small cities. They pop up wherever they may be. So it's always, the thing about social enterprises, they tend to be a little, like they tend to kind of hide a little bit. It's something that's really interesting. And so the key about it is to understand, what do you want the social enterprise to do for you? What are you hoping to achieve by having and operating a social enterprise? And social enterprises can take many different forms. So you can have a social enterprise that exists within an organization. You can have a social enterprise where it is the organization. So it is like a nonprofit and it is a social enterprise. So basically it's a business that is in the nonprofit structure. Or you can have a social enterprise that your organization owns. And so this is when you have a subsidiary of a nonprofit that owns a business. And so we're going to talk about the one on the right, which is that you can own a business as a social enterprise. It can operate as an independent business, and then profits go back into the nonprofit. So I just want to also say that yes, nonprofits and charities can operate social enterprises and they can earn revenue. It's allowed under CRA. There's certain tests around it to make sure that it's not a for-profit pretending to be a nonprofit, so it can't be profit-seeking. It's around the profits need to go back into the mission, right? They need to be focused and matched, and there's a bit of a mission test around that. So, but charities and so on are allowed to own and operate subsidiaries. So I want to talk about the opportunity that's coming, is that we have 98% of all businesses in BC are small businesses, and they create 57% of employment in communities. And the majority of business owners are older and they're thinking of retiring. And it's expected around 40% of BC owners will exit their business in the next 5 years. And so that's a lot of businesses that are going to need new ownership. And there's far more than there are buyers looking for a business to purchase. So we have a mismatch between the supply that's going to come and the demand that's there. You know, and at the same time, the nonprofit sector in Canada is facing an increasingly challenging funding environment with pressures to do more with less. And so in response to these pressures, many nonprofits are seeking to generate revenue by operating a social enterprise. And most social enterprises tend to be startup, which can take years to be financially sustainable. And so our question today is, what if nonprofits considered acquiring existing businesses as a social enterprise strategy? And so if you look and remember back at the businesses that we talked about, is that many of those businesses are pretty main street bread and butter businesses, right? They're landscaping companies, they're accommodations, cleaning businesses, you know, flower shops. They tend to be those types of businesses that are found throughout communities everywhere. And so if the business model that you're looking at, if you're thinking about doing a social enterprise and you've already decided that that's something that your organization wants to do, and the business model that you're identified is a fairly traditional business, then you might want to look at acquisition as an approach to look at instead of startup. There's a few different reasons for that. Is that startup can take years of starting up, gaining the resources, and working to, you know, take the business towards sustainability and generate the revenue. So it it does take years to that. An existing business is already generating revenue, right? So when you acquire a business, it's got staff, it's got structure, it's got brand, it's got processes, and it's already generating revenue. So it's in a different place, and that existing businesses tend to be more successful in terms of their stability and their than startups. Startups have a higher failure rate. So there is a reason. Now the challenges, and we'll talk about the challenges of why, challenges of startup versus acquisition, because they're different. You just kind of shift the way you think about it. But both have pros and both have challenges. So it really depends on what you're looking for and what you're thinking about achieving. So this is the acquisition process map. Here we have a traditional business on the left, and the goal is that when you acquire a traditional business, it transitions it into a social enterprise. And because a social enterprise is a business who has either works to achieve an environmental, social, cultural mission, or its profits go back into a nonprofit, when a nonprofit acquires a traditional business, it becomes a social enterprise. I mean, there's other parts around it that begin to transition as well. But right away, that profit ownership and profit going back to community helps and does that fundamental core transition into social enterprise. You can look here that we have a seller map, which is, they plan, they prepare, they sell, right? And then down below we have the buyer's map, and the buyer is a nonprofit or a charity. And so it's really looking at how do you plan, what are you trying to achieve, searching for your business, assessing, being able to invest, so looking for financing to acquire, to launch. This is the moment where your nonprofit owns the business, and then to sustain and continue to build in additional impact goals into the business. For example, if you want to have a social enterprise that provides employment to people who may face barriers to employment, there'll be a transition period within the acquired business to begin to onboard employees, to be able to expand the business so you create more employment, all those kind of things, so that the business begins to then transition to help achieve your goals. So I want you to just take a moment to consider and to think about, what do you think when you think about nonprofits and charities? What do you think are the key challenges that are unique to nonprofits in acquiring a business? But also, what do you think are the unique strengths that nonprofits have that will help them be successful in acquiring and transitioning a business to social enterprise? And we're going to put you into groups of, well, how many people do we have? I think I'll put you into 2 groups to have, a 5 to 7 minute conversation in your group to identify, what do you think the key challenges are for nonprofit acquisition, and what do you think the unique strengths are? All right, so Fernanda's going to invite you into a breakout room. Hi, welcome back. I hope everybody had an interesting conversation. So I'd love to hear from just someone from each group. What was the conversation? What came up as, we'll start with first, key challenges. And feel free to pop it in the chat as well. What were some of the key challenges that came up from your conversation?
I'll go.
Yeah, Laurel, that'd be great.
We talked about wage disparity and how to attract and keep motivated individuals and be able to employ them at a salary or an hourly wage that reflects their skill, but that also looked at that as a potential strength and opportunity as well, that if people are more interested in a cause as opposed to a paycheck, then you're able to attract differently motivated people potentially.
Okay, and what about other folks in terms of key challenges in nonprofits acquiring a business? Great.
Yeah, the long process was the kind of, if you're in private sector, an opportunity comes up, you can make a snap decision and jump on it right away. But when you in the nonprofit, you often have to go through a board and quite a longer process.
Right. And how about the unique strengths that nonprofits bring? Let's see. Aldine, what did your group talk about in terms of strengths? Oh, can you unmute? There we go. Thanks.
Yeah, we were talking about the fact that nonprofits already perhaps are used to going after funding in some way, shape, or form. So maybe they have a little bit more experience in applying for grants, government grants, et cetera. They may have those connections. They may have somebody on staff who specifically does that as part of their function in the organization. So it's kind of like a good news, bad news for key challenges and unique strengths. They could both be happening in either case.
Right. And then
Amy, did you have something to add to that?
Sure. I'm just a bit afraid of my microphone now. Yeah, I said that traditional businesses have these, contributions to community in terms of like the time, the charitable giving, all the social aspects that they add, and those things don't often add to their bottom line. And so nonprofits already have that sense of blended value and social purpose that, so that I thought that would be a strength.
Yeah, thank you. From the other group, does anyone want to add anything around strength? All right, so I want to talk about this example. So about a year ago, the Community Futures in Port Alberni was looking around at trying to acquire a business that would allow them to do a couple of things. They wanted to be able to have a training social enterprise, so where they could train business owners or people who are looking at businesses on how to operate a business. And they also wanted to be able to employ people in their community who may face barriers to employment. And this business, the Coombs Country Candy, came up for sale, had been in the community for about 40 years. And the owner was getting ready to retire and they made a connection and approach to say, would this be a business that could then be shifted into ownership by the Community Futures? And it had a couple of things that made it really appealing, is that they were looking to, again, as I mentioned, they were looking to identify one, a business that would meet a number of these goals. So they created key considerations to help them support and determine if this business would be a nice fit for them. And so they really wanted to look at a business that would support a Community Futures mandate. And that part is being able to provide an opportunity for that entrepreneurial incubator. They also wanted to find a place for an opportunity to hire people who have developmental disabilities. And so they wanted to look for a way to have, be able to use current talent in the community, but also to provide an opportunity for expansion that would allow for increased employment of people who do face those barriers. And also they wanted to set an example for other employers of being able to employ people who have disabilities and what that looks like in community. And so provide a real living example. And one of the things that was nice about this business is it has a storefront and it sells candy, but it also has manufacturing behind. So they were manufacturing and creating and making their own candy. And they saw that there was an opportunity to build out the manufacturing piece and be able to increase that employment opportunity and not only sell through the store, but potentially sell through online sales, sell off island, be able to see an opportunity for expansion there. They really need to make sure that was they could see that growth opportunity in the business. They wanted to make sure that the business was profitable and that had good operating margins. So they looked for the business to have 10% operating margins. And that means that they can achieve their employment mandate. They could provide additional supports within the business, but also they might be able to have profits that go back to support Community Future programming. So they wanted to make sure it was profitable. They did want to make sure that it was not that hard to operate. So they didn't want a complex business. And so I think that that's an important piece, but that it wasn't going to have easy competitors. So they didn't want to take one that would put them in competitive space. And so this business had been around for a long time. They're acquiring all the equipment, all the stuff, the space, and so on. And so there wasn't easy to have that many competitors come in, which gave them a feeling of stability in the community. And because they don't want to operate a candy business, that's not what Community Futures does, like in terms of their staff, they wanted to make sure that the business itself had strong management so that their role is as oversight and supervision, not as in the day-to-day operations. So they really looked at their staff to be able to continue as their management in there that had the ability to sort of step up and take over the operations of the business. And then they were looking for a place that was in their community with a long-term value. And so the location was just, they wanted to make sure that it was easy to access, easy to oversee, right? If something's far away, it just becomes harder to put your finger on the pulse and see what it is. And so they found that then they went through the process of doing this, that there was a ton of lessons that they learned. They learned that, that process map that I just showed you, they were like, follow the process map. And they helped that their story helped develop and guide the development of that process map. And so she found that if she had followed the process map, when you talked to Lori, who sort of oversaw that there were really lessons learned. She wanted to have the importance of having everything up front. She thought that they were going to proceed without it, with a mediator. And then months in, the owners decided to engage a lawyer, which meant that was an increased cost that Community Futures hadn't anticipated in the process. So being really clear about what are the costs going into doing this. And that impacted their timing as well. They made the purchase as by creating a subsidiary. And because the way that they purchased it, they created a new corporation. So it was an old business, went into a new corporation, they own the corporation. And because it was a new corporation, all of a sudden they couldn't get, it took a while to get the credit card. It took a while to get their bank accounts. It took a while to set up the corporation, which created a bit of a transition challenge for them. And so they actually had to have the owner continue to use their credit card and continue to sort of float the business as all those things came in place. And they just didn't have awareness of that. And so that transition, that impacted, it impacted the transition with suppliers and so on. So again, thinking through the process of how the transition is going to occur and having all those pieces in place. And so they had a moment of time where they had to sort of really lean on the goodwill of the owner. But their relationship with the owner was good enough that the seller continued to let them use their relationships and credit cards. But it took about a month to get everything sorted. So there was that month gap. The staff really wanted to know if they had a job, what their plans are, what they like to work with. And so they found that there was a transition of managing culture change, right? So you have the existing staff in the business who are, change is hard. So they were trying to figure out what do we do and how does it work and so on. So a lot of communication around what this meant for them, as well as communication with their internal nonprofit staff, right? What does it mean for them in terms of operating this business and how does this work in terms of the identity of them? So there is that culture change piece that needs to be really talked about to make sure that it flows. There's a real advice from everybody that we've talked to around acquisition of business is to make sure that you have that ownership transition, that owner can stay on. And the other examples that we've looked at, sometimes the owner stays on forever, right? They just move into a management role. They've operated their business. They don't want to be an owner anymore. But they still want to do the fun of the business. So they stay on as the manager, and that continues on, or there's a year-long transition plan or however that transition is, but there's a place to build the capacity, right? To make sure that everybody knows what's going on. And that just is a time because over a cycle of a season, lots of different things come up. And so it's that transition. And so and then right away, Community Futures began to professionalize the business. Sometimes what happens with small businesses or medium-sized businesses that have been operated by someone for a long time is that there's a place where they haven't come up to speed in today's world. And so there's that play to putting in point of sale systems and beginning to get websites going and online sales. This is where there's a lot of growth opportunity with existing businesses to kind of bring them and grow them. So, so that's just one example. And on our website, we have a few different case studies that you can look at. And I want to just say the sales of businesses really range. So one of the businesses that was acquired that we have a case study for, it was a hair salon and it was acquired for $6,000, right? The other one that was acquired, because I think it's important to talk about the money so we get an idea of what we're talking about. The other one that was acquired was a yoga studio and it was acquired for $30,000, right? This one was acquired. It had a lot of upfront capital costs. So this was $300,000. So you can get a sense of the cost of acquiring those businesses. And so when you look at financing of it, it's really looking at those revenues and what the business is earning, because that business then pays back the loan, right? If you have money to business, you want to make sure that business has enough revenues to be able to pay back the loan and what it costs to acquire. But just to say that when we talk about acquisition, is that sometimes the businesses are not expensive and sometimes they're more, and it usually depends on how much capital, if they have real estate, if they have equipment, right? Will change the price points of those. And so coming back to these challenges is that the key challenges for nonprofits in acquisition is, and someone mentioned this, is there's a culture challenge. Sometimes you have, a board or an ED, and they have different ideas of risk, right? And so an ED might be like, yeah, let's do it, or a board might be, yeah, let's do it, and the other one's like, we're not sure, this feels risky. And so there's a process of getting decision making in place, figuring out what that's going to look like, and being able to make sure that you have, and the recommendation usually is you have a subcommittee that really looks at this as an option. And because it takes decision making takes a lot longer in nonprofits and charities, is that there's an inability sometimes to respond in a timely manner. And I think you guys, that was mentioned, is that there's this time frame. And so being able to understand and get ready so that when an opportunity does arise, you're ready, is part of being able to reduce that time frame. And then the other challenge is access to financing to acquire the business. And this is nonprofits and charities have challenges in accessing financing because of often lack of collateral. So being able to think in advance what there might be options in terms of being able to think through where financing might come from if you're going for that, including, looking at where grants can help cover the cost of the process. Often you can't get grants to actually do the acquisition itself, but you can have grants to help getting coaching or support or being able to do business plans, things like that help prepare and get ready. So just thinking through that and then looking at, and some of the real unique strengths of nonprofits is that you're already operating an existing entity with systems in place and community and brand and staff and so on. And so there's often skills and capacity to operate an organization exists. And so it's about adapting those skills and knowledge to also be able to oversee a subsidiary or to operate a business as well. And so where there might be differences around how you operate a nonprofit and a business, is understanding those differences, usually around cash flow is the big difference. How nonprofits get their revenues is different how businesses get their revenues. And so how do you manage the finances becomes a different learning process. So it's allowing time for that transition. Nonprofits bring incredibly community goodwill and reputation. And so often the businesses that are acquired get a real bump, right? Community is like, yay, right? So you get a real community bump from bringing a business into nonprofit ownership. And it's also a way for the business to support the nonprofit, not only by revenues, but also by doing things like sponsoring events and putting donation tabs on there and becoming another channel that the nonprofit organization can share what it does to the community. And like I said, their nonprofits will have the ability to access funding to support business acquisition processes. So there is a way to support that. So when we did the acquisition process map, we looked specifically at the areas that are unique for nonprofits in acquiring a business. And this is around the planning. As I mentioned, it's being able to understand why you want to operate a social enterprise. What do you want it to achieve? What are the key values and alignment that your organization requires in order to start a nonprofit or to acquire a nonprofit? Really being clear about who's going to be responsible for overseeing the exploration and acquisition process. And so this is best as a subcommittee. And does your board have an understanding of their risk tolerance and an agreement to kind of shift from what I'm going to say is risk aversion, which is no, we can't do that, to risk assessment? So if we were to do that, what would that look like? So to be an open mind to thinking about the how and assessing risk rather than just saying no because it's uncomfortable. So that's a process sometimes for nonprofit boards to go through. And in the search, you're bringing together your nonprofit motivations with the key considerations of the business. And you'll need to assess the business and conduct your due diligence. And this is the same path that most acquisitions follow. So there's really good tools and resources to support. How do you look at a business and make sure it's a good business? It's not a dying business. It's a growing business, right? That's what you want to look for. It's a steady business. There's really great resources and supports to be able to do that. When you go to make an offer, this is when you will need financing, and the financing options are different. And so we have outlined, and I'll show to you the toolkit that we have developed, outlined all the different financing options that nonprofits and charities have access to. And then at the launch point, this is the moment the business becomes yours and the transition of management from the owner to the nonprofit. And as I mentioned before, there's a change management piece to consider, both with your nonprofit staff as well as with acquired business staff. And then finally and ongoing is the transition of this enterprise into becoming an impact-focused enterprise. So there might be other changes that you want to make, such as looking at suppliers, looking at at employment opportunities, looking at ways that the business can engage in community in different ways. So all the ways that you can bring that business more into alignment to the goals and objectives that your nonprofit's trying to achieve. I just wanted to open it up at this point for any questions right now about anything, about this process, about social enterprise.
Christy, I was interested in the community futures angle. I have a little bit of not direct experience, but many years ago, my son wanted to start a business and he was up island and he was able to start his business with the help of Community Futures. There wasn't any financial investment by them, but it was more of a guidance as to what he needed to put in place with his business plan and the various financing options that he might have, et cetera, et cetera. But do they also actually put money into businesses, or are they strictly a resource?
So Community Futures has a really great resource called Venture Connect that has tools and resources around there. And depending on the type of business and so on, they also might provide lending to support business acquisition. So, and as I mentioned, we're launching a Thrive Impact Fund for Vancouver Island, and part of that fund is also to provide financing for acquisition as well. So it depends. Some people don't have a Community Futures, or the Community Futures might not be able to lend in that way. And so there's building out some good financing options.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in here, it's Mark Fenwick, because I'm with a CF. I believe there's 34 CFs in BC, so the province is well covered. I believe most CFs have lots of cash to lend. So the CFs are really kind of an alternative lender if the entity or the business, the person isn't meeting thresholds at a bank or a credit union or somewhere else. The Community Futures office will look at it. In an IMO, there's plenty of money. We're always looking for new loans.
Yeah, and this project is supported in partnership with 4 Community Futures. And so those ones are, and I think they have supported the acquisition. So it's if you're in a community that has a Community Futures, then definitely they're important to talk to.
Yeah, I'm curious if anyone's aware of any grant funding available for these types of acquisitions.
I'm not aware of grant funding, Colin, that for acquisitions themselves. So there's different ways, and I'm not sure if it's needed. Like I would sort of question whether or not grant funding is appropriate for business acquisition. There are other tools that you can access to help acquire a business. So like community bonds, or you can do, a community fundraise, like a GoFundMe campaigns. Like you can raise capital from community in that kind of way. In terms of grant funding from funders, I don't see that, because they tend to support programs and services and so on. And this is acquisition of a business. But you know what, I'll never say never, but I'm not sure. Just because there was not grant funding doesn't mean that there aren't other tools that can help do this.
Yeah, I thought I'd read something earlier in the year about Island Coastal Economic Trust having some funds available, but I may be mistaken on that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if IST has funds available for business acquisition. That would be a good thing to check out.
When I asked them, they recommended this webinar. So
yes, yeah. I mean, they are supporting this project. So what we are going to provide, and I can talk about this next. So this is a toolkit that we've developed, and it's about to be launched. And so we'll send it out to everybody here. And it is the steps of all the things to think about around creating a successful business purchase. It's really for organizations that have said, yes, we want to do a social enterprise. So they've already decided that. And then this is to say, okay, so if you do, how do you begin to look at whether acquisition is right for you? And here's just one of the examples that are in there that helps you to identify what your considerations are, and be able to begin to assess businesses. And it goes through all of those different stages that were outlined in that graph that we have. So one of the things that out of this is that I talked about, Venture Connect is a good resource, Futures BC. And in the fall, we will be hosting what we're calling a business acquisition readiness incubator. So for organizations on Vancouver Island, if your organization is interested in exploring acquisition. It will be an incubator that will help your organization to get ready to identify what you're looking for, how to get financing pieces in place, how to make sure that you've got the decision-making processes and walk through the process. We're not going to go through a acquisition unless you're like, I'm ready, I've got a business, but it's doing that readiness so we can reduce the barriers related to time, to talk about, being able to do that, considerations and culture, and be able to make sure that take it through a risk analysis process, as well as put that financing piece in place. So that's the place where we'll get it. And so by the end of the incubator, organizations that go through it will be ready to acquire. So if a good business comes up, then you'll have the ability to acquire. And if you have, so there's 3 ways that we can help. We're just doing information sessions like this. If you are like, I've got a business, I think that I've got something that we want to move forward, and it's faster than that. So you're past like getting ready, you're like moving forward, then we can provide and support, provide some resources to support the process through that. So you can reach out and contact me. Or if you're like, this is an idea that we'd like to explore, then you can apply and be a part of the incubator. I want to thank, we'll leave some time for additional questions, but I just wanted to really thank these partners who've been a part of developing the tools and resources and overseeing what this could look like. There's the community futures that are all part of this project, a number of them. The province of BC and ICE-T and Royal Roads are all part of supporting and looking at what's possible here. So I wanted to just open up for any final thoughts or questions. Yeah, Laurel.
Just this is really fascinating to me. Is there, like, are some of the businesses that are positioning themselves to be sold looking specifically at maybe selling to a not-for-profit organization and therefore willing to have maybe a different like assessment or valuation, pardon me, of their business? Because I sometimes think that like maybe that, if they're looking to retire and get out of it, they would potentially be more motivated by the dollar figure. But
it's a great question. Thank you for asking that. There are so many reasons why people sell, right? So understanding why someone is going to sell a business is critical. The reason why we call this project Business Legacies is because there's a number of business owners that really want to have their business be a legacy in their communities. They want to maintain the employment that they have. They want to see that legacy exist and so on. And so when we reached out and did our first interviews, we interviewed nonprofits and we also interviewed business owners to ask, like, what is compelling about this? And for the ones that are compelling, they see a real value of having it go into nonprofit ownership because they know that their business is going to continue going and it's going to be cared for. It's continue to be in community. There can be a mix of financing that includes, if you're a charity, like donation receipts for assets, right? There's places where you can do a bit of a mix. There can be a place where the vendor finances and over time it transitions. And some vendors, they need to have, that's the retirement dollars. They need to get as much as possible out of their business, and other ones don't. Like it's very, very mixed. And so we see that there's part of it is just that conversation of finding the business. And then again, if the business makes its revenues, if the business is able to cover the cost of any loans or financing required, then it could be, they might not need to sell it at a reduced cost. And it still might make sense for a nonprofit or a charity to acquire it. If it, again, achieves the values and has values alignment, it makes enough revenue to cover itself and has an opportunity for growth and whatever those considerations are. And so that's part of the culture shift that I'm talking about, is that sometimes these transactions don't need to be subsidized, right? Depending on the cost of it, depending on the values alignment, depending on there's many, many factors. And then other pieces might be, we need to be creative around the financing of it. And so just as I mentioned at the beginning about social enterprises, there's like as many social enterprise models and ways that are approaching as there are nonprofits, as there are businesses. The same exists for acquisition. It's like, and so the toolkit really is framed as, this is what to think about. This is the process. These are the questions to ask as you move through it. But every acquisition looks different, right? And so this is the part of saying, can you find something, if you're thinking about social enterprise, is there a potential to have acquisition be solve it and bring a business into that kind of function in your organization faster than a startup, or in a different way than a startup. Laurel, yeah, what else do you think?
Yeah, thank you. So is there like would a business that is looking at selling know to connect with you, or like where does that kind of, how does that business figure out how to find different kinds of potential buyers?
Yeah, so Venture Connect hosts businesses, and Community Futures do a lot of work getting businesses ready for sale. So this project is really working with the buyer side. So for those that are interested in buying, because there's a lot more demand, like there's a lot more supply. There's a lot more supply of businesses coming up for sale than there are buyers.
Right.
So there's great resources, and again, like if you're interested, it's good to start looking at Venture Connect to see what's coming up, and then if it's of interest, if there's things that are coming up, I think that readiness piece is key, so that when something comes up, and I find that for the research that we've done, it's usually that you know your businesses in your community, you know the people that work in it. There ends up being like one of them, the hair salon that I talked about, was literally like a meeting on the street. I want to retire. We don't want to. They had a handshake. The business was sold. They signed. They didn't have lawyers involved. They signed an agreement and a process and so on. And there it was. And it was about just being the knowledge that we have in community and having those relationships. And for nonprofits and charities, you have board members, and a lot of them, some of them are business owners, and some of them. So as you begin to think about it, you can begin to get an idea of just what's out there in your community that might make sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you have any other questions, we'll send out our PowerPoint and so on. You're welcome to contact us if you're interested in being a part of the incubator. It's going to start in October. We'll start opening applications for it in probably September. And if that's something that your organization's interested in, then I encourage you to apply. It's going to be awesome.
Christy, a quick question.
Yeah.
The brochure that you mentioned about the pathway to business purchase, when will that be ready?
We tried to have it ready today, but it wasn't quite ready today because it's a fillable PDF. It's the Venture Connect workbook, Mark, that's been adapted for nonprofits and charities. So it'll be sent out. We'll send it out with a recording. Like everyone will get a copy of it, and then it'll be posted on your website. It'll be posted on our website. It'll be posted on all the Community Future Partners website as well as Venture Connect. So it's a resource for community through all our various partners.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.